This is the history of Louisiana State Penitentiary. The Louisiana State Penitentiary, also known as Angola, also called Alcatraz of the South, the Angola Plantation, or the Forum, is a maximum security prison form in Louisiana operated by the Louisiana Department of Public Safety and Correction. It is named Angola after the former slave plantation that occupied its territory. The plantation was named after the country of Angola, from which many slaves originated before arriving in Louisiana. Angola is the largest maximum security prison in the United States, with over 6,300 prisoners and 1,800 staff, including correctional officers, janitors, maintenance, and wardens. The prison sits on 28 square miles of land, or 18,000 acres. Angola is located at the end of Highway 66, and death row for men and the state execution chamber for women and men are located at the Angola facility. But that's how it is now. Let's start from the very beginning. Before Angola was a thing, in 1835, Louisiana built its first penitentiary called the Walls. It was located in present-day downtown Baton Rouge. The wall is no longer standing, but the warden house is. Thousands of prisoners, male and female, adults and children, black and white, free and enslaved, stayed in or at least passed through the walls from 1835 until it closed in 1917. In the antebellum period, almost 1/3 of Louisiana prison population was enslaved, and about 5% were women. White female prisoners, many of whom were Irish immigrants, came and went, while black women, subject to harsher sentencing, often came to stay. At the Walls, mothers brought children with them. Other women who were pregnant when they arrived or became pregnant during their incarcerations, their babies lived in the penitentiary. Under a law specific to the penitentiary, children born of enslaved mothers during their incarceration were state property. Between 1849 and 1861, the state sold at least 11 children away from their mothers. Before the Civil War, all convicts ate and slept in individual 7x4-foot cells with a 12-inch square grated opening and a solid iron door. They were chained by the ankles everywhere they went outside of the prison. Guard towers, armed guards, and brick walls enclosing Baton Rouge Penitentiary were designed to provide security, have convicts on constant surveillance, prevent escapes, and to represent a barrier between what society deemed as the good and the bad. The outer walls rose more than 3 stories to form a giant hollow square. Their foundations sank 3 to 5 feet below the ground. This depth and thickness presumably created a virtual impenetrable barrier to the outside world. The guards were well armed with muskets, pistols, and swords, but some prisoners still found a way to escape. In 1844, convict leasing began. Now, this was a method of using convict labor and leased prisoners to build private railroads, work in mines, and work in large plantations. Since the Walls failed to be self-sufficient, the state entered into its first convict lease to the McHannon and Pratt Company. This system would continue for the next 56 years and was only interrupted by the Civil War. Prisoners who were leased were forced to work under harsh conditions. Prisoners who remained at the Walls maintained the prison grounds and manufactured clothing and shoes for prisoners in the factories. In 1862, the Walls were taken by the Union Army. At the height of the American Civil War, it was decided to move the convicts to New Orleans when a musket ball fell into the penitentiary yard. Once the Civil War was over in 1866, prisoners finally were allowed to return to the Walls. Following the Civil War economic devastation of Louisiana, former Confederate Major Samuel L. James was granted the lease of the Louisiana State Penitentiary and all of his prisoners in 1870. In Louisiana, where the lease required for transparency and accountability, the James lease provided a new framework for adjustments. While others continued building levees, railroads, roads, the majority of black prisoners were subleased to landowners to replace slaves. White offenders were assigned to clerk and artisan jobs because they were viewed as being more intelligent. The few inmates who remained behind the walls continued to produce textiles. The majority of the prisons were subleased, therefore the walls mostly served as a receiving facility. In 1880, Major James bought various estates around Louisiana in order to achieve his goal of becoming a wealthy landowner, and one of the estates that he bought was the original Angola plantation. Major James sent a few of the male and female captives he was in charge of to Angola. The women took care of the house while the men worked on the plantation fields. The James prison camp was also known as Angola. The remaining inmates still being detained under the lease continued to work on under plantation farms and building levees and railroads. In 1886, it was a public outcry for reform, While Major James had the support and protection of the governor, the conditions for the prisoners at the Angola levee and railroad work sites worsened. Inmate deaths started to rise as Major James made them work harder and longer, which sparked a public outcry and resulted in the establishment of the Prison Reform Association in New Orleans. The convict leasing system, from which Major James had greatly benefited, was fiercely opposed by this group of concerned citizens. The Prison Reform Association and other community organizations were successful in getting a constitutional ban on convict leasing established in 1889. No prisoner sentenced to the state penitentiary shall ever be leased, according to Louisiana State Constitution in 1898. The state of Louisiana purchased the prison camp from the James family in 1900 and resumed control of the prisoners in 1901. After 56 years of convict leasing. This is the Angola Penitentiary that we know today. The old penitentiary, the walls, continue to be used as a receiving station, hospital, clothing and shoe factory, and place for execution until its final close in 1917. In 1917, at Angola, the convict guard system was born to reduce operation costs for the state. Firing remote security officers at Angola, under the convict guard system, inmates with good behavior called TRUSTY guards became lower tier officers for the penitentiary. In 1916, the walls officially closed and was sold to the city of Baton Rouge. In 1922, one of Angola's worst floods in history was recorded. When the Mississippi River broke through the levee, the water rose so quickly that they imprisoned several prisoners inside the sugar refinery in Angola. The staff and the prisoners were swiftly evacuated by a ferry. Angola's general manager, Fuqua, encouraged the owners of the nearby former plantations to buy the properties after the floods. The property owners happily sold the remaining former plantations to the state in order to increase the penitentiary current size of 18,000 acres because they were tired of the constant flooding. As the Great Depression and World War II became the public main concern, Angola faded from public scrutiny and collapsed into despair. The state significantly cut its budget and basically became concealed in secrecy, corruption, and brutality. With inmates' mortality rate significantly high, a mass escape was organized in 1933 by Charlie Frazier, one of Angola's most notorious prisoners. In the process of the escape, 2 employees and 1 convict guard was killed. The successful mass escape led to Angola building its first cell block, called the Red Hat, for inmates it considered to be the most dangerous. It received its name because inmates that was housed there were required to wear hats dipped in red paint to be immediately identified to the guards while working in the fields. The state's official method of execution up until the 1940s was hanging, but that changed when a legislator decided to use electrocution instead. However, an older law created an odd situation. Executions had to occur in the parish where the crime was committed. In order to comply with these requirements, Louisiana modified a van to fit the electric chair in its generator and would deliver it to the proper parish for scheduled executions. Livingston Parish carried out its first electric chair execution in Louisiana on September 11, 1941. 1951 is known as Hell on Angola. Angola's prison condition kept getting worse. From being exposed in the 1930s and 1940s, public outrage peaked when 31 prisoners cut their Achilles tendons to protest brutality, poor living, working conditions, poor food, and poor prison administration. With Angola earning its reputation of being America's worst prison, it was getting national attention, and Louisiana's new governor wanted to add extensive reform solutions. In 1955, to achieve the new reforms, the state significantly increased Angola's operating budget and the funds to build a main prison complex, which is still in use as the main prison facility today. The increased budget and new complex allowed Angola to introduce new rehabilitative programs and new professional staff to administer the programs. In 1956, the moving electric chair moved no more. The legislator moved execution to Angola permanently. In a small room where the electric chair was conducted next to the Red Hat. From 1956 to 1961, Angola carried out 11 executions before a temporary ban was imposed. Also in 1956, 5 men escaped by digging out the prison grounds and swimming across the Mississippi River. The Hope Star newspaper of Arkansas reported that one of the bodies was recovered from the river. Wallace McDonald was captured later in Texas after returning to the United States from Mexico. McDonald said that 2 of his fellow escapees drowned, but that was disputed by the warden. He said he believed no more than 1 inmate drowned. His men had found 3 clear sets of tracks climbing up the river. The Angola Prison Rodeo is the longest running prison rodeo that first began in 1965. as a joint endeavor between offenders, prison employees, and civilians who lived in Angola residential area. The first two rodeos in 1965 and 1966 were not open to the public. Beginning in 1967, a limited number of tickets were offered to the general public for admission to the rodeo. Proceeds from those ticket sales, like today, benefited the inmate welfare program, which funds recreational and educational programs for inmates. Spectators at the first rodeos had to either sit up on pickup trucks or bring seating to view the small rodeo. As the rodeo grew popularity, the penitentiary built its first rodeo arena in 1969, containing 4,500 attendees. Today, its popularity has grown so large that the new arena accommodates for more than 10,000 attendees. The prison rodeo continued to be a behavioral incentive to reward offenders with good behavior to complete various rodeo events, earn money in the competition, and sell hobby crafts, inmate-made furniture, and jewelry. Inmate participation is entirely voluntarily. Many offenders see the rodeo as a rare opportunity to feel a part of society outside of the gates and take pride in showcasing their talents. In 1972, Elaine Hunt was appointed as the head of Louisiana Department of Corrections. Elaine Hunt, the first female head of corrections in the state and second in the country, was a fierce advocate for practical criminal justice reform in Louisiana and was tasked with implementing court-ordered reforms, including the ending of the trusty guard system of Angola. After Hunt passed away in 1976, her successors continued her legacy, implementing rehabilitative reforms at the prison until 1977. Inmate violence decreased and the violent death rate plummeted to zero. In the 1980s, an inmate named Kursky Nix perpetrated a scam called the Angola Lonely Heart from within the prison. Nix was a former leader of the Dixie Mafia. Nix was a violent man. He's been convicted of assassinating sheriffs and judges. While serving a life sentence for murder at Angola State Penitentiary, Nix built a criminal empire which he hoped to earn enough money to buy his way out of prison. Although he dabbled in insurance fraud and drug dealing, Nix's primary money-making scheme was Lonely Hearts, a scam designated to defraud gay men. Nix and his prison syndicate would place personal advertisement in national gay-themed magazines. When men would respond to these ads, Nix or one of his associates would indicate that he was having financial difficulties and needed them to wire money to Nix's associates outside of prison. Kursky Nix acquired hundreds of thousands of dollars from this scam. In 1991, Louisiana legislator retired Angola's notorious electric chair with the first legal execution by lethal injection. Between 1991 and 2019, 8 inmates had been executed by lethal injection. In 1994, the American Correctional Association granted full certification to each and every Louisiana prison. The Department of Corrections had implemented numerous reentry-based programs across all of its facilities in effort to increase the parole compliance and lessen the obstacles that offenders face when looking for a chance to change and reintegrate into our society. In 1999, 6 inmates who were serving life sentences for murder took 3 officers hostage in Camp D. The hostage takers beat and fatally stabbed 49-year-old Captain David Knapp's. Armed officers entered the rebellion by shooting the inmates, killing 28-year-old Joel Durham and seriously injuring another. And by the 21st century, Angola retained its notoriety as being the most dangerous prison in the United States. On August 31st, 2008, now convicted New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin stated in a press conference that anyone arrested for looting during the evacuation of the city due to Hurricane Gustav would not be housed in the parish jail, but instead sent directly to Angola to await trial. You would not have a temporary stay in the city, you would go directly to the big house in general population. And he said, God bless you when you get there. In 2009, the prison reduced its budget by $12 million by double bunking, installing bunk beds to increase the capacity of its dormitories and replacing officers with security cameras. Louisiana State Penitentiary has been one of the most dangerous prisons in America since its birth. But right now, it's not as dangerous as it used to be, but it's still Angola and things happen. And this is the history of Angola.